Welcome back to The Glow Life. I'm your host, Maria Marlowe. On today's episode, we're talking all about how to support your immune system with Dr. Heather Moday. Our immune system is constantly protecting us from threats, from bacteria, viruses, microbes that we're coming into contact with all of the time. However, I feel like most of us forget about our immune system until we get sick. And of course, when we're sick, it's important to support the immune system, but it's also important to support your immune system before you get sick and to hopefully prevent you from getting sick. So in this episode, we're talking all things immunity with Dr. Moday. She recently wrote a book called The Immunotype Breakthrough, Your Personalized Plan to Balance Your Immune System, Optimize Health, and Build Lifelong Resilience. She is a board-certified allergist and immunologist, as well as an integrative and functional medicine physician. Exciting news! The Glow Life podcast is now available on Amazon Music and Audible. You can even say, "Hey Alexa, play The Glow Life with Maria Marlowe." Dr. Moday, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Maria.
So your recently published book is all about immunotypes. What exactly is an immunotype?
Right. So an immunotype is really how I started seeing almost like the personalities of different immune systems. So, as a functional medicine doctor, I see a lot of people who come in with all sorts of different chronic issues, but they sort of, there was a pattern of people coming in with either, autoimmune issues. A lot of people would have allergies. Of course, lots of people are inflamed, and lots of different sort of disease states. And, after learning a little bit more about, what sort of creates inflammation, what creates an autoimmune disease, there's actually a lot of things at the cellular level, like really at the immune cell level, that create these patterns. And so I created this idea of an immunotype to maybe help people have more specific treatments or things that they could do on their own to bring their immune system back into a balance. The term that I would always hear was you want to boost your immune system, which is, important in certain cases, but for some people, it's not really about making their immune system stronger. It's sort of redirecting it or balancing it.
Interesting. And so what are the different immunotypes?
Yeah, so we have smoldering, okay, weak, which is basically people who maybe don't have as active an immune response and maybe do get sick more frequently from infections, etc. The misguided immunotype, which is generally people who have some sort of autoimmune activity going on in their body. And then hyperactive, which is people who are responding to things that maybe aren't harmful. So, and having more of that allergic type reaction, reacting to things outside of the body. So those are the four.
And then how would you, I guess, so you mentioned one of them, you're more prone to autoimmune conditions, but how would you figure out your immunotype?
Yeah, so I created a quiz or quizzes, 4 quizzes that people can take in the book that ask them about symptoms and also about maybe diagnoses that they have. And when they add up the scores, they'll see that there's usually one that's predominant. People may have aspects of 2, usually not 3, but usually 2, that'll be maybe more dominant. And the idea is that, yes, we're not black and white, right? We can have a little bit of both, but you can sort of work to balance your most dominant immunotype first. So, it is possible, right, to have a smoldering immunotype and let's just say hyperactive. So you can have a lot of allergies and you can also have inflammatory disorders. So, but you can start working on one and oftentimes the other one will also benefit too, because a lot of the concepts, even though there are specific ones for each type, a lot of the concepts are really good for everyone too.
Yeah, it's like healthy food, right? There's healthy foods for certain conditions, but if it's healthy for one condition, it's probably healthy for for a variety of conditions.
Right. And so much of our imbalance in our immune system, for the most part, comes from chronic inflammation. And so most people, whether they're smoldering or misguided or hyperactive, they're going to benefit by ramping down inflammation. Um, the weak immunotype is maybe the only one that you don't want to be too aggressive with that because they actually need a more vigorous immune response.
Interesting. So what are some of the things perhaps across the board, or maybe if there's anything in particular for each immunotype, like what are just a couple top level things that can be helpful for supporting our immune system? Because I know now COVID times, this is really top of mind for everybody.
Yeah. And so, there's a lot of things that we can do just on a basic lifestyle level. And, one of the reasons I wrote this book is, we hear a lot of things like, oh, eat healthy, exercise, sleep well, whatever. But I really wanted to dig in to a lot of these major lifestyle attributes and show people, no, really, we have done research. There are scientists that have done research looking at what happens to your immune system when you don't sleep, right? Because I think it brings the message home more like, oh my God, I didn't realize that when I slept, my immune system was so active. Like that's a really, really, really important time. So I would say, obviously, sleep, very top level. We know that even, especially in the early part of the evening, so people who are like real night owls and stay up past like 1 o'clock in the morning, they're really shortchanging themselves because one of our best times for immune activity is before midnight, or before 1 a.m. or so, because we have very high melatonin levels at that time and very low cortisol levels. So those hormones, which are directed by light, like dark and light cycles, those circadian rhythm hormones, are very active in directing what our immune cells are doing. And so we know that when we get a lot of deep sleep, those cycles that occur earlier in the evening, we have a very vigorous immune response going on. So we're making all sorts of antibodies and we're doing a lot of repair to the brain. So that's definitely number one. I talk a lot about stress and how it doesn't mean that we can get rid of stress. I mean, we all have stress, but by doing things like meditation, we can actually improve our immune response. And we also know that excess chronic stress causes a poorer immune response in terms of antibody production. It can weaken certain cells like natural killer cells, which are one of our main cells that troll for cancer. So those are two major ones. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I feel like food is sometimes food or supplements are kind of the go-tos for a lot of people because it seems very tangible and just easy. Yes. Like, let me pick this up and do it. But it's interesting, right? It's really our habits, our stress, response and our sleep, which is things that we're doing, every day. That's really setting up our immune system for success or maybe not such success.
Yeah. And I mean, nutrition obviously is super, I wrote an entire chapter on nutrition in terms of, how certain things that we eat can be really, really helpful in balancing an immune response. Or so, if you're sleeping really well and you feel like you're managing your stress really well, yes, there's a lot of things that you can do with food, specific foods that can be really helpful. So you don't have to necessarily take supplements. I mean, there are some supplements that can be really helpful, but I would say start with food. Yeah.
And was there anything like really surprising that, maybe you didn't even think of or people wouldn't ordinarily think of in terms of supporting the immune system beyond the sleep and stress?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that, one thing that I found really interesting was, in terms of gut bacteria or, our gut immune response is that, many people don't know what's going on in their digestive tract because they may not suffer from things like IBS or, some sort of, acid reflux. And so they may think like, hey, actually my gut is really fine. But what we know is that, a lot of skin issues, let's just say, autoimmune issues, they can stem from problems with either leaky gut or excess inflammation that occurs in the gut, but it's going to show up somewhere else, right? It's going to show up in the joints. It's going to show up in the skin. So, and you don't have to necessarily get a stool test, although that can be really helpful. But you can do things like even just adding in fiber and fermented foods. You can do a tremendous service for your immune system just by doing those things.
Yeah, I love both of those things: fiber-rich foods, fermented foods, and so these are all things that we can be doing before, let's say before someone gets sick, to really make sure that our immune system is in a really good place and potentially prevents the illness. But let's say you get sick. Let's even just use COVID as an example. Once you're sick, then what should we be thinking about? Is there anything in addition to kind of the things that you just mentioned that should be top of mind?
Yeah. So it's interesting because there is sort of a functional medicine approach to COVID that I did not create, but and they've actually looked at certain levels of vitamins and can they really help even in the acute stages of something like COVID, or really any viral disorder. And these are the things that people often do hear about, but they have looked at this now. I would say number one, of course, is vitamin D, vitamin C, and zinc. So those are three really important nutrients that you can optimize and can be really helpful in, sort of improving or, this is where you do want to boost an immune response, right? Vitamin C, because it's an antioxidant, really important. Vitamin D as well. Zinc, because it does strengthen our antibody response. And there's also been a lot of talk about another not as well-known antioxidant and sort of master regulator called glutathione. Now, glutathione is expensive. It's not something everybody has access to, but you can take the precursor to it, which is called NAC, N-acetylcysteine. And although it's gotten very popular lately, it can be sort of hard to find, but that's actually been shown to be really helpful too. It's very protective in the lungs. So a lot of, there's been studies showing that they're looking at giving this to people who are in the ICU with COVID. So, these are not curative. I'm not saying that these are curative. I don't want people to think that. Prevention is key, but they can be helpful.
Yeah, I would imagine I've been hearing a lot about NAC now, I imagine because of COVID. And so, yeah, I think it's just like helping to fortify the body and helping the body do its job.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we don't know when we get sick, like what's going to happen, right? Because we don't have a microscope into our immune system, but, we know that this can help people. We know that there's research showing this. And so there's not really a downside to using it. I would never say that you should do this in lieu of getting other care or not getting a vaccine or anything. But, there is some pretty good data showing it can be helpful.
And what are your thoughts on vitamin drips? Because I've been hearing also that's kind of become more popular, like even doing NAC in vitamin drips. What are your thoughts on that?
So, I mean, I have nothing against using intravenous vitamin C or something like that. And that's been around for a long time. You can really flush the body with vitamins more readily if you're taking them IV. And glutathione has been used in certain diseases, but it's very expensive, first of all. And unless there's a problem with absorption through your stomach or intestine, you're better off just taking it orally because, a vitamin C drip can cost you $100 or so. And And, you can get a bottle of vitamin C for, $10 that you can use for a month, right? So I think that if you're acutely ill, getting a vitamin drip is a fine thing to do. I don't think we have a lot of data showing, though, that it's any more beneficial than,
just taking it orally.
Just taking orally. But, if it makes you feel better, there's no harm.
Yeah. So the immune system is quite complex. Can you just shed a little light on exactly how it works?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so it is very complex, and I did not set out to make this a textbook. And I'm not qualified to write a textbook on immunology, but, the immune system can be sort of broken down into two aspects, and that's our innate immunity or immune system and our adaptive. And they do cross over. So certain cells obviously play a role in both, but, most people can understand the concept that we have we have certain parts of our innate immune system that, just recognize something as being harmful, but maybe don't know specifically, what to do with it. They just know this is bad. So for example, let's just say we inhale a bacteria. We have a bunch of cells that are called phagocytes. So there's part of this innate immune system that they sort of go around the body and they see things that are foreign and they gobble them up, right? They destroy them, or so that's sort of our innate immune system, these cells, and they get rid of them, they create some inflammation, and things go away. However, some of these cells can also communicate with our innate immune system, which is a little bit more specialized. I call their sort of like specialized operations. So they can actually take a piece, let's just say, of that bacteria, take it to present it to some of our what are called T cells. They're a very, very, very important part of our immune system. There's different types of them. But the T cell will say, oh, I know exactly what this is, and I know exactly the kind of immune response we need to create. And so it can actually it can make other T cells that are specific to that bacteria. It can tell other cells called B cells to make antibodies specific to that bacteria. So this is a more specialized, nuanced, what we call adaptive immune response that also creates a memory. And so you can have memory T cells, you can have memory B cells, and you can have antibodies that when that thing comes back again, they can just bring those cells back and say, okay, we're ready. So it's pretty cool. So that's sort of like the two arms, and then they communicate with this fascinating repertoire of chemicals, chemical messengers, and those are called cytokines. A lot of people have heard about those, and there's many of them, probably 100 or more. We don't need to know about that too much more than that. There's a few that I mentioned in the book, but yeah, that gets in the real nitty gritty.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating stuff. And it's just fascinating how intricate our body is and how everything kind of works together. There's so many moving parts. Yeah, it's really, really fascinating. So how do things like toxins and parasites, how do they affect the immune system?
Sure. So a little bit differently, right? So we are exposed to all day long, right? In sort of infectious agents. Like if we really thought about like the viral particles and the things that we picked up from the ground and, bacteria, we would probably get really grossed out. But, you've seen those pictures when they're like, what's on the door handle, right?
Or the subway handle.
I know, like, oh, right. We'd all become major germaphobes. But our immune system is there to protect us. And so its job is really to recognize things that could be dangerous and then to quietly get rid of them or create an immune response that we don't necessarily feel in the body and make things go away. Now, sometimes we do feel it, like when we actually do get more infected. Okay, so for example, when you get a cold, right? I mean, you feel achy, you might have a fever. That's our immune system working. Same thing as if you cut yourself, right? Or if you have a surgery, things are swollen and red and, hot, and that's inflammation doing its job. So, that is that's great. But it all should resolve and go away, right? We should all go back to sort of a normal baseline after our immune system has created this inflammation and done the job. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen for everybody. Now, the same thing with toxins too. Toxins, although they don't infect us, they activate immune responses depending on the toxin. So we can have immune responses to heavy metals, to organic compounds that are found in pesticides, to things that are in our makeup. So I think that, people don't know a lot about that around toxins because there's not a lot of data. And I think part of it is because we use toxins all the time, like they're in a lot of our products. And but I think we're starting to really learn that our immune system has negative responses to toxins, and we really need to look at that, and we really need to clean up our environment for sure.
Oh my goodness, so many things I want to ask you now. Well, talking of the fever, right? So the fever is one way that our body fights off pathogens. It raises the temperature to try and kill off, whatever pathogens might be in there. So I had read something a few years ago that was talking about how when you get a fever, you should actually let the fever run its course as long as it's not getting too high, because your body is actually trying to kill the thing that's making you sick. And if you lower the temperature, you could be prolonging the illness because you're taking away your body's, defense mechanism there. So Absolutely. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is true. And it's not exactly the same, but this is one of the reasons also that sauna seems to help. There's been some studies. Sauna does a lot of things. It helps us sweat and detoxify, but there are some studies looking at sauna and decreased infection with things like influenza virus or flu virus. And it probably is because it's heating up, our body temperature. Most saunas, you're starting at, 130 or so degrees. And so, so that's one thing to think about. And we don't want, like you said, your fever to get too high, that can be dangerous. And that's like, with children that are getting fevers up to like 104, 105, you do want to bring those down because those can be very damaging. But if you have a fever of 101, yeah, you can sort of just let it, you can
sweat it out
and sweat it out. Because it is true, it does help. Whether or not it prolongs the issue, I don't know if there's actually been any real data looking at that, but conceptually, yes. But fevers are uncomfortable, so people want to get rid of them,
Yeah. And what's also interesting, again, because COVID's top of mind now, there are very different responses to it. Some people obviously have terrible symptoms. Some people have very mild symptoms. Some people have no symptoms. So in terms of like the immunotypes, I guess, where would you kind of put each of those people? And then like, if you don't have symptoms, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Is your body not responding? Like, can you just unpack that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So, part of that may be genetics, right? So we do know that they did some interesting studies, and I don't know if this is really panned out, but looking at blood types and how certain blood types, maybe because of things like clotting, may have a tendency to get more side effects or severe disease. But also we know that there are huge risks. So people who have like more smoldering immunotype or people who are more inflamed don't do as well because they're already so inflamed to begin with. So their immune system is a little sort of busy, right? Putting out other fires. But also because some of their organs may be compromised by their diseases. So for example, let's just say you already have heart disease. We know that SARS-CoV-2 attacks heart muscle. We know it attacks actually a lot of different organs, not just the lungs. But let's just say you have heart disease or you have diabetes or lung disease already. When a virus attacks those tissues, you're going to be compromised. Same thing with obesity. There's just a recent study that was written about in the New York Times that I think the the research hasn't been peer reviewed yet, but they've showed that SARS-CoV-2 hides out in fat cells, and that may be one of the reasons why people with obesity, independent of any other heart, lung issues, might not do as well, because the virus can hang out there. The fat cells actually create a lot of those inflammatory cytokines trying to clear it out, and those cytokines can then be damaging to the body if they're in excess. So, so there's different reasons why people might not do as well. In terms of whether or not people actually get sick, that's a little bit less known. Part of that, again, might be due to age. We know that younger people tend to have a more vigorous response than the elderly, and maybe they're just more efficient at getting rid of it. And so that might be part of it too. But, part of it may be that the people that aren't getting so sick really just are healthier. Like, they're doing a lot of the things that I write about in the book.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, it's been such a whirlwind these past few years, but the great thing is that we've had time now, I feel like, to get our sleep in order, get our stress in order. And if you haven't done that already, let this be the reminder to focus on those things. What about like things like breath work, meditation? I would imagine that that's helpful for reducing stress and keeping the immune system strong.
Absolutely. So the thing about stress, and I wanted to really unpack a little bit about our stress response, because, I think people feel guilty a little bit about the fact that they have stress in their lives. And, that's not the case. I mean, we all have stress in our lives, and some people maybe more so than others. Maybe people are under financial stress, or they lost their job, or they're, someone's sick in their family. That might be accelerated. And so you want to do as much as you can to decrease your stress exposure. And there are definitely, we all probably have done this, but we've gotten ourselves into situations that, maybe we're overworking, or maybe we're in a toxic relationship. There are ways that we can actually get out of stress. But if we can't, then those things that you just mentioned, meditation, I'm a big fan of doing, breath work. I talk about the 4-7-8 breath. Really anything, tapping, anything to sort of retrain how your body responds when a stressful situation comes up. Because really it's our response to the stress, and not necessarily the stress itself, that is driving the hormones, which then can I don't want to say dismantle, but, throw us off when it comes to our immune system. I want people to understand that, you can do a lot. You really can.
Yeah. I'm curious, have you done any research or have any thoughts on like cold therapy, doing an ice bath or like cold showers?
More of really how it increases something called autophagy, which I do mention. Autophagy is, I liken it to sort of like a recycling of our cells. Right? So, and those cold plunges can actually increase that cellular turnover, and that can be really helpful in maintaining a streamlined and resilient immune response, because we have autophagy in all of our cells. But if you think about it, our immune cells go through that too. So cold plunges can be really, really helpful for a lot of different reasons. And that's one of them when it comes to immunity.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I started doing them a couple years ago. Actually, yeah, I guess since COVID started, because before that, I'm like, I hate the cold. I'm never, I can't even go in like a cold pool or the cold ocean. I'd rather skip it. But I said, let me do it. I did a breathwork class that had the cold plunge, and I did it. And I'm sure there's physical benefits like you talked about. But for me, the most impactful thing was that I like could control my thoughts. And I felt so fearless afterwards. I was like, oh my God, if I can sit in this bath for 2 minutes, I am unstoppable. I can do anything. And I noticed that afterwards, in the weeks afterwards, and, you know, even till today, I handle my stress so much better. I'm so much more calm, because when you're in the cold, like obviously you're freezing, and you're kind of just reassuring yourself like you're okay, and you know, trying to just stay calm when it's a time where you want to, like, you know, jump out. But if you can train yourself to stay calm under stress, oh my God, you can do anything. You know, you really feel unstoppable.
And that's a great example of being able to sort of control your body's response. So, you know, similarly, people like longtime meditators. So when you talk about these monks, you know, Buddhist, Tibetan monks who are able to get, you know, and this comes after obviously years of practice, but they're able to control their bodily function, so they can lower their blood pressure, they can lower their heart rates to really low levels just by getting into a meditative state. And not that, you know, we're going to become Tibetan Buddhist monks, but, you know, you can do even a daily 15-minute meditation and can be really helpful. And then, you know, even like therapy and doing you know, cognitive behavioral therapy, I talk about a little bit, being able to change your thoughts, to be able to question when something comes up that's very upsetting to you, is actually thinking like, is that true? Is that thought really based in reality? And when you go, oh, actually, no, it's not, you know, like if someone looks at you on the street and they're frowning and you think, oh, that person hates me or whatever, you can question that and say, is that really true? And it's not, you know, maybe they're having a bad day and has absolutely nothing to do with me. And that actually changes then how your body feels. And that can, of course, change your stress hormones. So really, you're describing that you became really sort of present and very mindful in this practice of the cold plunge. And then that's carried over to now when a stressor comes up, you're like, oh, I can handle this because I can do anything, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The mind is a funny thing, but it's also a very powerful thing. And it's it's amazing once you realize the control that you have with your thoughts. You know, I think we kind of think things just happen, or, you know, we feel a certain way. Like we kind of think those are, you know, and our thoughts are real, but then you realize like, no, they're not. And you're in control of your thoughts. Like they're not just coming, you know, you actually can control them, and you can change them, which is
yes,
so
absolutely.
simple but mind blowing.
Yeah, I know, it's so simple, such a simple concept, but most of us, we get ruled by, you know, our monkey brain, right? We're like, we just let it have free reign, and you know, and all of a sudden we're like thinking things that are completely not based in reality, and it's making us feel horrible, and that's changing our stress response and our hormones, and then that changes our immune system.
Yeah, it's nuts. And it's crazy how, like, I remember it so many years ago when I would get really stressed, I would get like this weird, like my eye would like swell and get like crusty, like get this weird thing. And I noticed it would happen like if I had a really stressful event and I was like crying or something, the next day it would be there. And like at first I thought it was random. And then, you know, I realized, oh, this happens like, oh, after a breakup, or, oh, after like a very stressful event. Right. So like the three times or so that it happened, I was like, oh, I pinpointed it and said, okay, this is definitely, you know, related. And then I, you know, really worked very heavily on managing my stress and getting that under control. And it has not happened since. So it's like the stress piece is so, so important, and it's not something to be overlooked.
Absolutely. And I see this all the time in my patients who have autoimmune disease or chronic gut issues, even something like, you know, IBS or just, you know, disordered gut movement, right? We all know, I mean, it's sort of like, we know that sometimes when you get really stressed out or really nervous, what happens? Your GI tract decides to like hijack you, right? You either get constipation or diarrhea, or maybe you just get nauseous, right? That's our stress hormones changing how our GI tract moves. But we also know that with people who have autoimmune disease, sometimes their symptoms might flare after they're under a period of stress. Or what I see all the time is stress is the thing that finally brings it out, right? That, they go through a very stressful event, they lose someone they love, or they go through a bad breakup, or they hate their job for years and they have a toxic boss, and all of a sudden they get sick, right? Several months later. And we know through research looking at, childhood adverse events and trauma, even military history, that this can bring out an autoimmune disease later on in life. So it is really important to take your stress response very, very seriously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the trauma piece is quite interesting. I had another doctor on here once who was talking about autoimmune disease and even her own autoimmune disease, and how that trigger piece of it. Sorry, can you hear me? Did I freeze?
Yeah, you froze for a second. So if you could just back up like
sure.
3 sentences, maybe.
Sure. The trauma piece is quite interesting. I actually had another doctor on here who was talking about autoimmune disease and then the trigger piece of it, the trauma piece of it, which is quite interesting. So I'm curious, are there any practices or anything in terms of the trauma that you think might be helpful?
Mm-hmm. So, you can heal, right, from autoimmunity. You can heal. I think the therapy piece, so cognitive behavioral therapy, or doing, of course, I'm not a specialist in this, but, doing things like EMDR, and that kind of thing can be helpful. There are programs that work with sort of retraining your vagus nerve and what's called your parasympathetic response. So when you have a stress response and you get in that fight or flight mode, that is what's called your sympathetic autonomic nervous response. It's automatic, right? But that is what sends our stress hormones soaring, our adrenaline, etc. The parasympathetic response is the opposite. It's sort of the more soothing. It sort of shuts things down. It helps us digest. It helps us sleep and relax. But a lot of us get in sort of this state of we're in that fight or flight all the time. And it starts to sort of unravel. And, working with a therapist or working with people that can help you sort of improve that parasympathetic response can be really helpful too over time and very healing. And there are different programs out there for doing that.
Mm. So you mentioned something that I want to kind of call out because I feel like autoimmune disease is really on the rise. It's very prevalent. I think we all know so many people that have it. Mm-hmm. You said you could heal autoimmune. So I think traditionally that thought has, in conventional medicine has been, if you have autoimmune, you have it for the rest of your life. There's really not much that you can do. Mm-hmm. So can you, first of all, explain what an autoimmune condition is, what exactly is happening, mm-hmm. and then talk about, how do we heal it?
So that's going to be very specific based on where someone is, obviously, what kind of disease, how long they've had it, etc. Because I also don't want to be the person who goes around saying, everyone should be able to cure their autoimmune disease. That is not true. Because it really depends, of course, on severity and, that kind of thing. And I'm not against people using medications. They can be very life-saving, obviously, and managing of the symptoms. But the idea that you cannot change your immune response and you cannot improve autoimmunity or even reverse it is definitely not true, because I've seen it. So specifically with autoimmune disease, and it obviously changes from disease to disease, but the premise is that we get into an immune response that is directed and destructive against our own tissue. and there's 100 plus autoimmune diseases. So just to say, like rheumatoid arthritis, right? It's attacking mostly joint tissues, but can attack the skin. Obviously, if you have something like a multiple sclerosis, you're attacking the myelin sheath of the white matter of your brain and your spinal cord. So they're very different tissues, but the idea is that there are destructive antibodies that are made against the tissue, and often destructive, what are called T cells against those tissues. So, looking at what maybe caused that, so you can do things like, if you have a massive amount of stress in your life when you're not managing it, you can start with that. If you have tremendous leaky gut problems, you can address that. If you're exposed to a lot of toxins in your life, you can remove that, because those are going to continue to be triggers for you. So in functional medicine, we'd like to call those mediators, right? So there's antecedents, which might have happened in the past, and there's mediators that are still going on. So you can remove those, and you might find that many symptoms go away. There's less flare-ups. People may need less medication. These are all really wonderful things. Maybe the biomarkers start to go down. And I have seen this with many clients. But then you can really get specific and actually get testing done and say, like, what is going on in my gut? Am I eating foods that are causing this to flare? Do I have nutrient problems? Do I have an infection? Am I harboring something that is constantly triggering me? So you can get very specific with autoimmune disease. And I'm a big advocate of people with autoimmune disease advocating for themselves and finding someone to work with, because you shouldn't take that no for an answer, right? You should not have to listen to a doctor saying you have no other, course than to do what I'm telling you to do.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I'm so glad you said that, because sometimes I think people lose hope and they feel like this is just the cards that I've been dealt and there's nothing that I can do about it.
Exactly.
Because that kind of was the notion, maybe in previous years, but it's absolutely not true. And there's plenty of cases of, like, you said, even with your own patients, having like significant improvements. So it's really important to also keep that hope and then find that practitioner who will help you figure out exactly what you need to do.
Yeah. And, and we're out there, and, I always say that, I think that, I'm conventionally trained at my background, right? So I grew up in the halls of conventional medicine, and it has tremendous value. That's how I learned so much. But there's definitely holes. There's not a lot of curiosity and creativity in medicine anymore. And I think that the power of the human body's ability to heal has been pushed out of the way in preference of using extremely strong drugs. And I don't think it's an either or. I think that you need to sort of look at both and say, wow, we've got some powerful drugs that we could use. But we also need to work on other systems. We need to look at what you're doing in your life and how can you, do a lot of your own healing. I think when you add those two things together, it's very, very powerful. And I don't understand sometimes why certain doctors feel very threatened by a patient who says, I want to try this, this, or this. If it's not harmful, and they're not being, boondoggled into some expensive alternative therapy, there's nothing alternative about sleeping and managing your stress and eating well. That is not alternative, right? It's just common sense.
And I think that we've kind of forgotten that our body wants to heal. Like our body is always sort of moving. When you get a cut, it heals. Right. When you get a bruise, right? Like it also heals. Right. And it's like our body is constantly trying to move us in that direction of good health. We just kind of have to get out of our own way sometimes, and prevent, stop bombarding our body with the things that are impairing our immune system, repairing our body, and giving it more of the good stuff that's going to support it.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that I want people to feel empowered that, their body can do amazing things. And, as long as they treat it well, you can really, really do a lot without having to take a lot of medications. But there's nothing wrong with taking medications when you need to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But important to remember the body is resilient. So that's
very resilient.
Very resilient. So are there any things that you do day to day, or like any routines or anything that you try to add into your day to make sure that you're really supporting your immune system?
Yes, I do. Now it's funny because, of course, as a functional medicine doctor, I'm reading all this stuff all the time and studying and, so, I do take quite a few supplements. But I would say my diet is I really try to focus on getting really good things in my diet. I am not a person who is super restrictive, but for one thing, I don't eat a lot of sugar. I do remove that, and I don't eat things like industrial seed oils, so fried foods. I really try to limit any of that. It can be hard when you go out to dinner, but you can make good choices. Snack food, fast food, anything like that. And I really try to eat a lot of vegetables and fruits that have a lot of polyphenols in it. I try to eat like sort of superfoods, lots of cruciferous vegetables, but I will add things like green tea. I try to get turmeric. Some things I will supplement with. So, obviously I stay inside a lot during the winter, and we don't get a lot of vitamin D from the sun. So I do take vitamin D. I take extra vitamin C. I do take probiotics, and I try as much as I can to eat fermented foods. I'm not a huge fan of sauerkraut, but I really try to find other options. I try to eat a lot of fiber. So I would say I concentrate a lot on my nutrition and trying to get many different nutrients through that. And then I am pretty religious about my sleep, and it can be a little hard because, women, when they get older, right, when they're approaching, in their 40s and 50s, sometimes our sleep gets a little not as great as it used to be when I was in my 20s, right? So I'm pretty disciplined about sleep, getting to bed early, trying to really hit the 8 hours, limiting that screen time and blue light exposure. So those are big things that I do. And then movement. I mean, I think just getting outside in nature and really trying to prioritize getting away from technology, because I think that is very healing too. And so, that's something I try to do as much as I can.
Yeah. Well, thank you. This has been so informative. And if you guys want to learn more about the book, you can check out the Immunotype Breakthrough, your personalized plan to balance your immune system, optimize health, and build lifelong resilience. And where else can people find you?
So the best place to find me is on Instagram. I tend to be most active there. We do have a Facebook page as well for my practice. But that's usually where I am most of the time. As I said, I try not to do too much social media because, I try to have other things in my life, but it's a great community, and I do post, quite a bit, and, there's some good information on there that people can read.
And do you, because people are always looking for functional medicine doctors, so do you practice nationwide or certain states?
So yeah, I practice in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Virginia. We do have programs that are run by my nutritionist that people can do regardless of where they live, and a lot of the same tests, and so that's always an option. And we hope to be rolling out some other sort of group courses soon. So that would also be an option for people who maybe couldn't commit to working one-on-one or couldn't because of where they live. So.
Got it. Got it. Well, thank you so much. And I will put the links to your book and to your website and all the social media links in the show notes.
Great. Thanks, Maria. This was really awesome. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening to The Glow Life. If you have questions, comments, or topic ideas, head over to Instagram at Maria Marlowe and drop me a line. If you enjoy the show and think others might too, please share this episode and take just 1 minute to leave a review on iTunes, Amazon Music, Spotify, or whatever platform you listen on. Your review truly helps the podcast grow, reach more people, and bring on incredible guests. As a thank you, send a screenshot of the review to info@mariamarlowe.com and you'll get a free copy of Glow From Within, a 3-day reset plan to nourish your body, calm your mind, and ignite your soul. It comes with a delicious 3-day meal plan to help you bring out your inner glow. P.S. You can listen to the podcast on iTunes, Amazon Music, Audible, Spotify, and even watch the video interviews on YouTube.